Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. Today, Russia launched one of its largest attacks on Kyiv. There are killed and wounded and 600,000 people were left without electricity. Just hours earlier, a Ukrainian delegation departed for peace talks in Washington. More on that in just a moment, but first, more of today's top stories. Ukraine says it successfully targeted Russian Shadow Fleet tankers with underwater drones in the Black Sea. Tens of thousands of people protest in Germany against the formation of a new AFD youth wing. And the mustache run in Bulgaria takes place to raise awareness of men's health. 2 people are dead and 38 injured in the latest Russian attack involving over 600 drones and missiles. Meanwhile, 2 Russian shadow tankers and $70 million worth of oil later, Ukraine is not giving up the fight and pushing back, hitting Russia where it truly hurts its oil revenue. Let's now go live to Oz Kataji in Kyiv. Good evening, Oz. So this was a massive attack on Kyiv. Is this a signal that Russia is not even slightly interested in pursuing peace? Give us the latest.
Well, that's the way the Ukrainians are certainly interpreting it. The early hours of Saturday morning interrupted by anti-aircraft fire as Russia launched yet another wave of attack drones and missiles, largely targeting the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. 3 killed overall across Ukraine. More than 30 wounded. Another difficult day for the Ukrainian Air Force. President Zelenskyy in his address said that Russia launched 36 missiles and 596 drones onto Ukrainian territory, so quite a large one. Most of those targeting the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. 500,000 people were without power here in Kyiv alone. So, a very difficult situation for the Ukrainians when their capital is being targeted with such regularity. It was less than a week ago that I was reporting on similar strikes against Ukrainian properties. Once again, Ukrainian residential buildings damaged. Now, as to your question about how Ukraine views this, well, we had a statement from Andrii, Sybiha, the country's foreign minister, in response to this, laying out how Kyiv views these strikes in the context of these peace talks, saying while everyone is discussing points of peace plans, Russia continues to pursue its war plan of 2 points, kill and destroy. So the Ukrainians certainly think that Russia is sending a message with these strikes.
So there is a message being sent by Russia, but there is also a counterattack and there is a message sent by Ukraine. What do we know about the attack where Ukraine managed to strike the Kairos and Virat tankers? Tell us.
Well, these oil tankers in the Black Sea region were reported to be empty. That's an important point. These weren't full of oil, so Ukraine didn't want to obviously risk an ecological incident in the Black Sea. But Ukraine has been arguing, Kyiv has been arguing for some time that Europe and the West aren't doing enough to stop these sanctioned oil tankers basically ferrying Russian oil to purchasers across the globe. So this attack really is part and parcel of Ukraine's campaign to degrade Russia's oil production and export facilities. So this should really be viewed as part of that. It is the first time we're seeing something like this against Russia's oil tankers. Russia will certainly be thinking more carefully about sending them into the Black Sea region now. And we've seen the footage coming from these Ukrainian unmanned surface vessels. So these are naval drones that they've used to such devastating effect in the Black Sea region so far. So this was an SBU operation, Ukraine's intelligence agency. Very clear that they see this as part and parcel of that campaign against Russian oil.
Thank you very much, Oz. That was Oz Kataji reporting live from Kyiv. This was a plot twist few could predict. Zelenskyy's now former chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, who was supposed to head to Washington to lead negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, is now instead heading to the front lines. Yermak announced his plan less than a day after he resigned from office following a raid on 2 of his properties by Ukrainian anti-corruption forces. Could Yermak be trying to turn the tables by following in the footsteps of Winston Churchill and joining the military to save his political career? Franciszek Pilis looks for the answer.
Just hours ago, Andriy Yermak was expected to travel to Washington to hold negotiations on a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia with his American partners. In a shocking twist, the now former chief of staff of the president of Ukraine told the New York Post that his resignation from his post will be followed by a trip to the front lines.
I'm going to the front and I'm prepared for any reprisals. I am an honest and decent person.
But how did we get here? It all started with a crackdown on Ukraine's energy sector by the country's anti-corruption watchdogs, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, or NABU, and the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, or SAP. The probe revealed a $100 million corruption scheme that involved current and former energy officials, a prominent businessman, government ministers, and a former deputy prime minister. A large chunk of the members of the criminal organization running this scheme consisted of close aides of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. This is where Andriy Yermak comes into play. A man so close to Zelenskyy, some would go as far as to call him his shadow, or even more.
He was the most powerful figure apart from Zelenskyy, and some even believe that Yermak was even more powerful and more influential than President of Ukraine. All key appointments, from Prime Minister and ministers to ambassadors, from regional heads to the top military brass, where all of these appointments had a hallmark and approval of Andriy Yermak.
Andriy Yermak got implicated in the anti-corruption probe following NABU raids on his apartment. Shortly after, his boss had this to say.
Andriy Yermak, the head of the president's office, has submitted his resignation. I am grateful to Andriy for ensuring that Ukraine's position in the negotiation process was always presented as it should be.
If the corruption allegations weren't bad enough, Yermak's resignation comes at a crucial time in the peace negotiation process between Russia and Ukraine.
He was extremely influential in the foreign policy field, and he was the main channel of communication, the main representative of Ukraine on American track.
As for Yermak's replacement on the negotiation team, things are also looking bleak.
As far as I understand, there is a new negotiating team recently announced by Zelenskyy. The problem is that he named a part of this team also Rustem Umerov, who is the head of National Security and Defense Council. The problem is that he is also under the investigation.
Now, back to Yermak's pledge to make his way to the front lines. The move resembles a similar career maneuver by one of history's most famous politicians, Winston Churchill, who famously decided to leave politics after the Gallipoli campaign and serve on the Western Front himself, effectively saving his political career.
It depends what the true nature is of Yermak's outcome of this investigation by NABU and SABU in Ukraine. Now, if he's guilty of absconding, then going to the front's not going to help him.
Whether or not the move has the same result for Yermak as it did for Churchill remains to be seen. However, even now, one thing is clear. Following Andriy Yermak's resignation, Kyiv has a massive personnel hole to fill, and time is short. For TVP World, Franciszek Pilis.
Hungary is an accomplice in Russia's terror in Ukraine. That's how Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andrii Sybiha commented on the latest visit of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban to Russia and his meeting with Vladimir Putin. Hungary has once again defied its Western partners and their creed at a time when Russia is bombing the civilian population day in and day out. Kazimierz Wysiak has this next report.
It's the second visit of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban to Russia in 2 years. Hungary relies heavily on Russian energy, gas and oil, and that's how Orban justifies his friendly relations with Vladimir Putin.
We did not succumb to external pressure and did not stop our cooperation in any of these important fields.
This pressure coming from Ukraine's Western allies, as purchasing Russian energy in bulk is allowing Moscow to continue its brutal invasion of Ukraine. Russia earns close to $500 million annually from sales to Hungary, making scenes such as these a daily reality. According to Ukrainian officials, Orban is now partially responsible.
Putin once again used Viktor Orbán as an accomplice to his terror. Putin is simply using such politicians as actors in his bloody spectacle.
Orban's European partners are not impressed either, albeit they're used to his antics by now.
I wish to remind our allies that NATO was created to defend the West against the Soviet aggression, that is, against Russia. and its foundation was solidarity, not egoistic interests. I hope that nothing has changed.
He is acting without a European mandate, and he is doing so without consulting us. That is nothing new. He has his own ideas about ending this war. So far, they haven't been realized.
Prime Minister Orban is under mounting pressure domestically as well. That's Peter Magyar, the leader of the opposition party TISA, steadily rising in popularity. According to Politico's average score from various opinion polls, TISA is now comfortably in the lead with 47% ahead of the 2026 parliamentary election.
We have the absolutely unique situation that Orban is facing a difficult election next year at home, and both the US and Russia want him to remain in office. Isn't that exotic?
In November, US President Donald Trump gave a one-year exemption to Hungary from the sanctions imposed on two of Russia's largest oil producers, Lukoil and Rosneft. For now, Budapest will continue benefiting from Moscow's deliveries and vice versa. For TVP World, I am Kazimierz Łysiak.
Early Saturday morning saw one of the largest protests in Germany's recent history. Members of German trade unions and left-wing groups gathered in Gießen to oppose the revival of the controversial extremist youth movement at a conference held in the town by the far-right Alternative for Germany. More on why the opposition to this reboot is so strong in Randy Pott's report.
The population of the small university town of Gießen, Germany, has almost doubled this weekend, protesters gathering as early as 6 a.m., swelling the streets, as members of German trade unions and left-wing groups are out protesting against the formation of a new youth wing of Germany's largest far-right party. After thousands of protesters physically blocked most access ways to the conference, German police began using water cannons. Germany's far-right AFD, the Alternative for Deutschland party, is trying to reboot its controversial youth movement at a conference held in town this weekend. Due to protests at 10 a.m. when the event was scheduled to start, the hall of the exhibition center was only a quarter full. Youth movement, now renamed Generation Germany, was originally formed in spring of this year, but was quickly disbanded after German intelligence services labeled the group right-wing extremist. Protesters were unable to stop the conference, but they are determined to stay in the streets.
We are here today with a very clear goal: to prevent the founding of the AFD Youth Wing. This is a right-wing extremist youth organization that is to be established. We believe that this must not happen, and we will prevent it.
Although the AFD has no formal ties to the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump, both Vice President J.D. Vance and tech billionaire Elon Musk have actively spoken up in favor of the party this year. Vance while in Munich, and Musk in a speech given directly to an AFD conference.
You should be optimistic and excited about a future for Germany. That's really my message, is be optimistic, excited, and preserve German culture and protect the German people.
According to public broadcaster ZDF's Politbarometer poll, nationwide support for the AFD stood at 27% on November 21st, equally as strong as the centrist CDU party. Late in the afternoon on Saturday, 800 members of the AFD chose its new leader, Jean-Paul Hohm.
We are the generation that assumes responsibility and fights with all necessary determination to ensure that Germany has a great future. We are Generation Germany. Join us.
Outside, police continued to hold the perimeter as protesters vowed to stay in the streets.
We are here right now blocking access for the AFD youth with our bodies. We have chained ourselves underneath the car and we aren't going anywhere anytime soon. And we are here because it is deeply important to us to stand in solidarity with all those people who are already being persecuted by fascists all over the world.
For TVP World, Randy Potts.
Apple is under fire from the Polish Office of Competition and Consumer Protection after the body accused the tech giant of unfair practices benefiting its own ad tracking programs while limiting advertisers' ability to collect data on users' preferences. Is this a sign that Poland is following EU regulators targeting big tech companies' coffers? Maciej Wilowski explains.
Scrutiny against big tech is coming to Poland. This week, the country's top antitrust regulator, the Office of Competition and Consumer Protection, in the building located just beside me, launched a formal probe against Apple, accusing the tech giant of undermining competition in the market for digital advertising. Under scrutiny is Apple's App Tracking Transparency, or ATT feature, a privacy tool that allows users to choose whether apps can track their activity across other apps, learning their preferences to send them ads based on their interests. Poland's regulator is investigating whether Apple unfairly benefits from its ATT feature on the grounds that the company's own apps, like Apple Maps or the Weather app, are not subject to the same rules imposed on third-party apps. But advocates of the ATT feature say it helps to protect users' privacy and personal choice.
Apple is responding to a real consumer desire for privacy, and that desire exists among Apple users, but exists among all people who are using mobile software and mobile apps and mobile phones.
Efforts to rein in big tech have also emerged from the Polish government, where a proposed 3% digital services tax could soon be introduced.
Certainly, the Ministry of Digitization wants to implement a digital tax to strengthen the state budget, to bring more money for administration, for the development of artificial intelligence, and for Polish startups.
These actions suggest Poland is increasingly following in the footsteps of EU regulators, which for years have levied multi-billion-dollar fines on big tech companies. The latest volley came in September when the EU fined Google nearly €3 billion for what it said were anti-competitive practices in the advertising technology or ad tech market. U.S. President Donald Trump has heavily criticized the EU's antitrust actions.
We're upset with the European Union because of what's happening with not just Google, but with all of our big companies. They just, hit them with this mess, these unbelievable fines.
Whether or not these moves are justified, Poland is increasingly taking a stand to curb big tech's influence. Maciej Wilowski for TVP World.
Warsaw played host to a diplomatic event this weekend that might not make international headlines, but it could have an influence on the shape of diplomacy in years to come. The Warsaw Model United Nations Congress is designed to give high school kids a taste of how international organizations operate, providing them with valuable skills they can take into further education as well as their professional lives. Andrew Sweeney reports.
It is an amazing experience. That's why we actually continue to have this club.
I was persuaded by one of my good friends to attend a conference in September 2023. And from that moment on, I was hooked.
It's been really fun.
Yeah, we're just having interactions that we wouldn't normally have.
Hundreds of high school students from Poland and further afield gathered on the 27th to 30th of November for the Warsaw Model United Nations. The attendees took part in debates designed to reflect the experience of diplomats, some rooted in reality and others more unusual.
The Security Council Committee is the most serious one, and I think they have the most intense debates. For example, the historical community discusses the Casablanca Conference of 1942, and they have pretty creative debates.
By advocating positions they might not normally take, the Model UN participants improve their debating and critical thinking skills.
Really beneficial for the students because apart from all the political issues they learn they learn how to make a research, how to see what's good and what's bad, how to find the real news. But they also learn how to challenge themselves in public speaking.
While also building their knowledge of global politics, all valuable assets as they move from school to further education and the workplace.
You also get a knowledge of the geopolitical state of the world. You understand the relations and the interrelations between various countries.
Now, the aim of events like this is to foster a sense of understanding between students of different backgrounds. And maybe if they go into diplomatic service, that will prove particularly valuable. So the idea at its core, though, is that today these students are learning from the mistakes of the past so that tomorrow they can make our world a better place. For TVP World, Andrew Sweeney.
As Movember, a month dedicated to men's health, is coming to an end, let's take a look at one of the recent initiatives to raise awareness of the importance of diagnostics among men. The 5-kilometer mustache run in the Bulgarian city of Burgas. Piotr Miszczuk has the details.
Mustache, a historical symbol of wisdom, masculinity and bravery. Now it's particularly popular in November when men grow their facial hair to raise awareness about men's health as part of the annual Movember campaign. One related event is the 5-kilometer mustache run in the Bulgarian city of Burgas.
Many of the participants grow mustaches during November and encourage all men to get a prostate check. Quite a lot of women participate. Just as women have prevention for breast cancer, thinks that the earlier they are diagnosed, the earlier they can be stopped.
Some women have also got in on the initiative.
We are in solidarity with men's health. We run with mustaches because we want all men to go to preventative checkups so they can be healthy.
Men tend to test themselves significantly less often than women. Some, however, wish to break away from this stereotype.
Once every 6 months I get my blood count. I check these pains that I have, and possibly if I feel any deviations from my normal condition.
Prostate cancer is one of the most commonly diagnosed cancer in men, making up nearly 15% of all male cases worldwide. Although it has a very high survival rate, early detection is crucial as the prognosis worsens significantly when the cancer spreads to other organs. For TVP World, I'm Piotr Miszczuk.
With another wave of attacks on Ukraine, the country's retaliation on the Russian shadow fleet and Andriy Yermak's resignation ahead of the peace negotiations in Washington, D.C., it's time to discuss the latest from Ukraine with my today's guest, Mark Toth, co-founder of IntRep 360. Thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Good evening, Claudia. Thank you.
So Andriy Yermak is actually going to join the ranks on the front line. Your assessment of such move by him, is it safe? Is it actually a move to save his political career? Has it been well calculated? What's your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's an act of desperation on his part to retrieve his reputation. Whether or not it works or not, time will tell. As I was mentioning earlier to several colleagues, if he is found guilty of these charges or faces these charges, his political career likely will not be resurrected. It also remains to be seen whether or not Ukraine is willing to have someone who's played such a major role in Zelensky's government on the front lines, potentially to be captured by the Russians, and all of the information, intel, and any insight he might have about future Ukrainian negotiating positions and war plans. That just may be a bridge too far. So he may say he's going to the front lines. I get why. He wants to pull a Winston Churchill here and reinvent himself in the eyes of the Ukrainian people. But I'm not so sure he's going to end up on the front lines. Time will tell.
And how do you think Yermak's resignation and his moves now are going to affect Volodymyr Zelenskyy, especially in this very particular point in time when the future of Ukraine depends on what's going to happen in days and weeks to come?
It's a great question because it is tricky. In the long term, it probably helps Zelenskyy. Yermak was not a popular man in Washington, whether you talk to Democrats or whether you talk to Republicans. They thought he was abrasive and that he was not conducive to having meaningful discussions as opposed to just pushing Ukraine's points on people trying to find some type of compromise. So I think in the long term, it helps. However, in the short term, this probably comes at the worst time for Ukraine because it is facing challenges on the battlefields on the Donbass. It is facing challenges diplomatically because of Trump's peace framework, and it's playing into a Russian narrative right now, especially Kira Dmitriev, one of the authors of this peace plan that's being negotiated in Miami right now. The Russian head of their sovereign bank there, he's a guy that's using it to say, hey, look, Ukraine is corrupt. So in the short term, it really hurts. This is not a crisis that Ukraine needed at this moment, but it's here, and unfortunately, they're going to have to overcome it.
And do you think that Ukraine can actually afford more resignations, especially when it comes to top aides, top ministers? What's your opinion?
In the long run, they can't. Look, they have absorbed resignations in the past. The United States, going back to our own Revolutionary War, we survived Benedict Arnold, betraying the country and the treason that he committed. Countries at war can do this, and I'm confident that Ukraine can. Again, though, personally, I would rather see them focusing on prosecuting the war, getting it done, as opposed to looking at these things internally, because they distract from the top leadership of the country, Zelenskyy and his generals, from staying focused on how to make sure that Russia doesn't win this. But I'm confident that they will survive it.
Let's move to the attacks now. We've had an update on what's happened to Kyiv overnight. Many people injured, some were left dead, half a city left without electricity. What message is Russia sending as of now by having those intensified attacks, especially when it comes to the capital, when peace talks are in motion?
Right, Claudia, it's the same message that Putin has always sent whenever he negotiates with Putin or he perceives that there's a critical moment where the Ukrainians are negotiating with Team Trump, if you will. And it's a message that, look, I'm going to attack you. I don't care if civilians are involved. He wants to put an exclamation mark on his maximalist negotiating positions. This attack last night, 596 drones, some of those were decoy drones, 36 ballistic missiles, did indeed knock out half the electrical power. Now, 360,000 people have been restored to power, but it sent a big message. And it wasn't just to the Ukrainian people that this war is going to continue. He's signaling to Trump that unless I get everything that I want, and so far your plan doesn't give me everything that I want, this war is going to continue.
So we've seen that Ukraine actually had a response. There was an attack on 2 oil tankers on the Black Sea using underwater drones. According to latest information, there has been no oil loss, but that's a clear signal that Ukraine is sending to Russia. We're looking at your oil industry that is going to actually hurt your coffers. Do you think that this action, yet another action by Ukraine of targeting not the civilian population, but targeting the infrastructure, the refineries, the tankers, is actually going to make Russia think twice about what their next move, their next step when it comes to attacking civilian targets?
Yeah, one would hope. It certainly is putting pressure. It's the best sanctions that, absent European and U.S. sanctions, secondary sanctions, if you will, on those oil fleets that Ukraine can do. And certainly there is messaging here that Ukraine is now willing to go after this shadow fleet, as they should. I mean, General Ben Hodges has been on TVP World, has called for that as well, and I concur with him, that these things have to happen, that you can't keep allowing Russia to get economic revenues, if you will, from selling of oil, only to turn around and use those to attack Ukraine in terms of funding drones and the like. So hopefully that it will. I think Ukraine needs to do more. It's not going to be enough, though, to be a tipping point. It's not enough to change, at this point, Putin's cost calculus. That's going to have to come at the hands of Europe, frankly, because the U.S. seemingly is not willing to do that yet with something like Tomahawks. But I think Europe can change that if they are willing to do something like a no-fly zone over Western Ukraine. But these attacks in and of themselves are helpful. They should continue. They're doing great damage. They're pressuring the Russian economy greatly. It's causing oil revenues to decline substantially, especially through the Black Sea. And so by all means, they should keep doing it, but more is going to be needed to change Putin's cost calculus if he's going to change his tact at the negotiating table.
According to some of the latest news when it comes to the front line, we know that unmanned system forces blew up $60 million worth of Russian air defense systems in 3 days. As we're looking at Russia on the front line, do you think we're getting to a point in time where this could also possibly change the dynamic of the peace talks, or are we too far off yet? And as you mentioned before, we will have to see some more action from Europe and from the U.S.
But it's going to take more action because, look, the front line still, for the most part, and I'm speaking in terms of a material assessment here, are pretty stationary. Russia is making some gains, but Ukraine and its armed forces are being very clever here. Sometimes they're gaining territory only to do counterattacks to entrap the Russians, and they've done that in the Donbass. Russia wants you to believe that they're making greater progress than they are. Like in Kupiansk, Putin has said several times that he controls it. That's not the case. In the north there, near the Russian border, Ukraine's been able to push back. And so from that standpoint, I share the Institute of Study of War's opinion, their assessment here, that Russia simply isn't in a position yet to maneuver, to take wide areas of ground in the east, even though Putin thinks that he can. And likewise, though, on the similar front, Ukraine isn't in a position to maneuver either. That means to push forward forces past the front line. So I think for the most part, aside from some loss of kilometers, not tens of kilometers of territory in the east, it's pretty much still a static war, and that it's going to take some game changers from Europe, like I said, in terms of a no-fly zone over Western Ukraine in order to allow the armed forces of Ukraine to push assets up into these front lines. Until that happens, I think you're going to see a pretty static front line.
Thank you, Mark. That was Mark Toth, co-founder of Interep 360, joining me here on the program. Thank you once again.
Pleasure. Good evening to your viewers.
And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska. Thank you for joining me on the program. And please do stay tuned here on TVP World for more news and features coming up in just a moment.